Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We are delighted to have Dr. Katie O with us today to talk about her new book, North Korea in a Nutshell, A Contemporary Overview, which she co-authored with Ralph Hasek. It's an excellent overview of life, society, economics, and foreign and military policy in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. If you have not had a chance to read it yet, I would commend it to you, and copies are available on Amazon for $34. Here's a copy of the book if you haven't seen it before. Also, so you know, the proceeds from the book will go to provide support for the activities of defectors and global human rights leaders to work for the positive transformation of North Korea. So the proceeds go to a good cause at the end as well. Katie, as I'm sure many of you know, worked for more than 30 years on Asian affairs at the RAND Corporation and the Institute for Defense Analyses. She is also the author of multiple books on North Korea and has been widely cited on issues related to the Korean Peninsula. At the end of our discussion today, we'll be leaving time for questions from the audience. If you have any questions for Katie, please leave them in the YouTube chat function, and we'll be monitoring it there. Katie, we're glad to have you with us today. And maybe to start off, I'd like to sort of talk to you about sort of the origins of the book. You've written 4 books on North Korea, including this new book, North Korea in a Nutshell. What drove you to really write this book? What was the inspiration for it?
First of all, thank you, Troy, for the nice introduction about the book. Also, the proceedings going into the activity fund for the defectors. I really appreciate that. And all 3 books previously written was co-authored with my husband and my research partner because I was a full-time worker and hardworking. And after 3 books, basically we concluded, well, we wrote the good 3 books and the world should know the reality inside North Korea and what kind of a proper policies that the foreign governments can choose. But we were absolutely wrong. Either people don't read, or even though they read, they don't understand, even though they understand, but they don't do anything. So finally, we decided we tackle another book, and that's the reason why we wrote this book. Basically, let's write a book very clearly written, very clearly presented, very diverse topics inside North Korea. So then people truly understand that inside North Korea, same human beings who desire to live like us are living there. And so maybe you can find a better way to change and transform North Korea. That's the reason why we wrote the book.
Well, then I'm glad to see that the proceeds will go towards trying to help make that happen. So the book itself has 10 chapters, 9 plus the conclusion. And they deal with aspects, as I mentioned, North Korean society, geography, history, the life of people in North Korea, the leadership, foreign relations, the role of the military. Could you give potential readers, or if you could give potential readers one message, what would it be?
Well, if you remember, Troy, that the first nuclear crisis basically started at the beginning of the 1990s, right? When the intelligence community discovered by satellite North Korea nuclear weapons program. And since then, I think for the past decades, all foreign governments, including our own government and South Korean government, have been preoccupied with the nuclear and missile development. That is fine. But the implicit message of the book is that, look, if you are very knowledgeable and truly understanding North Korean politics and society, there is no way that North Korean leader will give up the nukes. We have been preoccupied with the nuke issue and neglecting what's really happening inside North Korea. As I mentioned, there are same human beings who desire to have a freedom, happiness, welfare, and a good education are all living there and do their struggling to survive. So implicit message is that it's time to look into North Korea and learn the reality there. And then from that understanding, we can start working possible successful implementation of new policies. That's the message.
I think this is a very salient point. I know, when President Biden was elected, there were all kinds of stories about how he had to immediately engage North Korea on the nuclear issue. And I found it somewhat perplexing because we were in the middle of a pandemic. North Korea had shut its borders. It had no access to vaccines, no access to tests. And so it seemed as though, we were totally focused on the nuclear issue when that might even be the main issue for North Korea at the time. But so along, this line, we've talked about this. North Korea's nuclear missile tests, they get the most attention. But what is the newest development inside North Korea that you think people should be aware of?
Well, if you remember, for the last several decades, including the top experts of intelligence community of European government and American government, basically said that, look, North Korea is a big black hole of information. I think those days gone. Although we are still struggling, the real timely new development is not arriving with the media immediately, but still we can understand what's going on. The biggest change is that North Koreans themselves decided that the socialist communist system is not working for us. The biggest starting point was 1994 famine, right?
Yeah.
And from this famine, what they learn is that, well, top-down policy is not working. We got to survive. So biggest development is that first started stealthily, silently, quietly, but now more visibly, more loudly. There is a new market forces developing and economy is changing. So basically, North Koreans become a new capitalist. And that's the most important development in the daily life of the North Korean people. That's we have to focus on.
I think this is one of the things the book is really good at. I mean, I spent a lot of time obviously looking at North Korea, and there were, a lot of different things in here in terms of like education and other things that, even I found new. So I think you're right. There's a lot of information out there. The book does a really good job of trying to help point this out. But speaking of our perceptions, I think if you look at the way the press often covers North Korea, there's this idea that Kim Jong-un or the North Korean regime, that they're not rational, perhaps even crazy. Is that the case?
Well, my short answer is no. And I give you short evidence. Usually the crazy people, this of course the insights and perception are given by my husband who has a psychology degree. They are the people not in touch with the world. They try to segregate. They are hiding themselves. They are very afraid of dealing with the people. But if you look at North Korea, they basically actually more engaged in the global community by putting out the threats and all these things. In a sense, they are not crazy. They are maybe the most rational, in a sense, to contain and deter foreign interference. So that's the short evidence. And so in that case, the second question maybe to your first question is that why in that case people think North Korea is crazy? Well, there are some physical and visual things such as it does not conform to the norms of the poor country. The poor country has the so-called first country's weapons development program, and they're capable of doing that. And also it makes outrageous statements such as we'll make Washington burning sea of inferno, or South Korea will be ruined under the shower of the North Korean bombs. This is outrageous threats. But what about also the lifestyle, and including the current leader's hairstyle? All these things combined together, I think media simply accept that North Korea might be crazy, but I don't think so. And the only reason we have to think about is that in that case, why does North Korea act this way? Well, because they have a limited contact, they have a limited the freedom, press, and the leader can do anything that he like to do. So basically, as a one-man dominating dictator country, in a sense that they seemingly doing the crazy stuff, but they are actually very rational. And in my honest view, I think the world is crazy, that we have to pay too much attention to this so-called crazy country.
Well, you mentioned the idea of that the North Korean leader, has absolute control, and we often talk about, like Kim Jong Un, Kim Jong Il, or you know, um, Kim Il Sung, that they are an absolute ruler. But is it possible for one individual to really control the entire country, especially if such an impoverished country?
Well, the North Korea actually is not unique, and it's not the only case. Although the three generations of Kim dynasty maybe have been in power longest in the human history, but if you look at the African states and some of the states and countries, there are a lot of bad dictators. So in that sense, it's not uniquely North Korean phenomenon. But North Korea may be, in a sense, unique in the sense that they achieved almost near perfection or success to control. So how could that happen? I think we should be really given some of the historic, the background. North Korea has been a Confucian state before the Japanese colonialism, and first ruled by the strong central Yi dynasty and the class system, and then Japan dominated. And then what happened? Socialist communist, not even socialist communist. It's a one family ruling dynastic dictatorial system. So those are the important factors. So in a sense, North Korean citizens for the last 2 centuries never had a single full perfect freedom day living like a normal human being. So that's a historic legacy, which is easy for Kim to control. Also, from the first leader, Kim Il-sung, up to the third leader today, they have been working to transform North Korea into a perfect police state. The layers of social control, security control, it's absolutely stunning. They've been put the best efforts, and it's working. Not only that, they have a civilian spy system, reporting, maybe even children can report their parents' behavior. Students can report bad teacher. It's a very badly managing human relationship, but nonetheless, it's worked for the state and Kim regime. And finally, there are cultural factors. If the father is going to Gulag, son is going, everybody going. In Korean system and the culture, family is the foundation, as in any other countries, but much more strongly. And you have an obligation to give happiness to your children, not to the worst life. And lastly, if you are maybe very brave man, you know that you will be the committing suicide basically if you are the first rebellious person against the regime. So for the last 6 decades, they've been really almost near succession, they've been controlling. And that's the reason why Kim is in control.
So I want to dig a little bit more into some of the societal aspects. North Korea has, in essence, its own class system, Songun. Could you tell us a bit about this and how a person Songun impacts the prospects for life in North Korea?
Well, actually, when I was working on North Korean studies and analyzing, my father was from North Korea. So I asked my father, Dad, if we were living maybe in North Korea, what kind of a class we belong to? And we definitely belong to the hostile class. It is amazing that at the beginning of the regime, they made a 50-some categorization of a human being. It's absolutely incredible, but that it has been too crowded and complicated. So gradually they segregated the entire population into 3 large classes. Core class is absolutely loyal to Kim regime. They will, to the last day of the state, they will stay together. And then there is a swaying class, like a pendulum. Sometimes they pretend that they are loyal, but sometimes different time they may join the rebellious group. And lastly, hostile group. Hostile group is basically absolutely categorized non-trusting bad guys. Percentage is between core is about 15 to 20, and the swaying class 50 to 60, and the hostile class about 20 to 30. And they try to wipe out, systematically eradicate hostile class through the indoctrination, sending them to the prison. Did they succeed? No. As a matter of fact, they didn't succeed. So based on that, if let's say, if I were belong to the hostile class, what kind of life do I have? Actually, I interviewed a lot of the defectors, and I interviewed the newly defected North Korean army captain. And I asked him, you had a good job and happy family life with the children. Why did you defect? He said he worked very hard, and he was so hard working and bright, dedicated. Everybody said, you will be the first one to be promoted to a major. He was expecting that. First year didn't happen. He cried. Second year didn't happen, didn't work. Third year didn't happen. Finally, he asked around, and one guy whispered to him, check your file. All these individual file, what kind of class you belong, and background check is severely controlled by the limited cadre, and it's a state secret. But he spent a lot of money and finally bribed the person in charge of his file. He opened it, all red underlined, from his grandfather to his father and him. Although his father was party member and he was army captain, basically said, this family, the original grandfather, was originated from Jeolla province in South Korea. And then they ended up to be working in the north. During the Korean War, grandfather went back to his hometown, and this is reactionary hostile class. As long as they work hard, we keep them, but no promotion, no benefit, no reward. When his father passed away, the state did not give him even one single wooden coffin. So on that miserable day, he made a decision and he defected North Korea. So this is the thing. Your children's education, your job, your promotion, where you go to Kim Il-sung University or whatever, you get a national passport, all belong to this categorization criteria. In a sense, North Korea is 21st century's medieval kingdom.
And I mean, that's really what's amazing is that, you can have people who are talented, perhaps even loyal, having grown up in the system, but they just don't have the future prospects that they would like and expect just because of, past family decisions and things.
Yeah, it is really sad.
Yeah. So, obviously the nuclear weapons we've mentioned are the sort of thing everyone focuses on. But why does North Korea insist on pursuing its nuclear weapons programs and the ballistic missiles to carry them, especially considering that, in essence, these are the reasons that North Korea has essentially had most of its economy sanctioned and they're excluded from the international community?
First of all, we know that the leader Kim's family and the close confidant and supporters are the main decision makers. And then they decided to keep the nuclear weapons. I think from the beginning of Kim Il-sung era, even though he met the President Carter and then signed the agreed framework and everything, they never had any serious intention to fully give up the nukes. North Korea's case, it is disliked, disrespected. It's a pariah state. It doesn't have a great natural resources. And it's a rotten economy, just a bottleneck economy, never changes. So the leader needs something to hold on. And I think for the poor state, nuclear weapon and missiles are the best weapons to have it with you. And leader, of course, has a dilemma. If you have a small developing nuclear weapons arsenal, you may be preempted, attacked, triggered by the maybe perhaps United States, or any interference can be possible. But the other side of the dilemma is that if you give up, they may be, regardless of your giving up, the somebody will try to interfere in your life. As a leader, holding his power, holding his regime, this is the best system to hold on. So I think North Korea is over that dilemma because from maybe one bomb, they already have a multiple warheads and missile development is continuing. So until the last day, these defensive deterring weapons will stay with them. And so basically, unless we see the changes of the regime or reforming leader, I don't see any changes whatsoever. And it's already too late. And I think that's the reason why me and my research partner argue that if you're holding on to this nuclear issue constantly, instead of resolving it, you are into the quagmire and further deeper into the nuclear dilemma. Nothing you can do. North Korea will doggedly hold on it, and we have to find a way to live with it and also how to change inside the people to do something themselves, not we trigger something.
I think that's the key. And I mean, one of the lessons is that change will have to come from within, not without. And, that's challenging. One, we have the pandemic now, but obviously North Korea has put in place travel restrictions due to COVID-19. Prior to the pandemic, it wasn't exactly known for welcoming foreigners. What are North Korean attitudes towards foreigners?
Well, there are limited numbers of tourists and visitors and diplomatic circles, and then they exist, but it's a very few number compared to the most open societies. And the ordinary North Koreans dealing with speaking to foreigners illegal. If you are caught on the spot, you can be punished. And they are indoctrinated. Don't talk, don't show, don't even get close. So in a sense, they are totally segregated, even though there are some foreign presence. Not ordinary people do not have any exposure to them. And that they are basically segregated from the real world. The only news is the propaganda government news. And the government news is incredibly beautifully written. For example, the America is filled with homeless and stupid murderers and burglars and killers, and South Korea is students of the American states, and Japanese are washing the American food, providing the basis. I mean, the way the concocting words is one of the worst form. Let's say it's a propaganda, but if you live there and there is no other media, and you see, read every day, educated, you gradually get some kind of indoctrination, right? But I think gradually they are getting some idea. The Chinese are not bad. They live a very happy life eating the good food. South Korean goods are so wonderful because of this penetrating illegal media from South Korea popular culture. I think that they now understand that China, South Korea are totally different worlds. And maybe some of them even think America is not bad. We would like to send our brilliant kid to MIT to study computer, or pianist to Juilliard. So I think the concept is changing amazingly, even in that segregated society.
Yeah, and one might could argue that North Koreans never really intended to follow through on this, but it's one thing that I always found fascinating was the joint proposal to host the Olympics in 2032 in South Korea and North Korea, because if you actually were to get the Olympic Games and that were to go forward, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of foreigners suddenly flooding North Korea all at the same time. And I can't imagine that that's something that, the regime really wants to try and deal with. But, speaking of dealing with the population and everything and change within, the UN estimates that about 40% of North Korea's population is under the age of 24. How do the younger generations differ from the older generations in North Korea?
It is amazing. Even though they don't have any real open media, somehow the younger generations are savvy with the new technology and using their cell phones and all these things, and through the illegal media penetrated into their society. They are much more knowledgeable about the outside world. They are very different. They are very different from their ancestors. And they also developed some interesting taste and keen interest, curiosity in foreign culture, particularly popular Korean culture, fashion, music, food, etc. It's incredible. It's just rampantly sweeping the youth culture in North Korea. And they have no real interest in domestic media. They pretend to listen, but they don't give a damn about the North Korean media at all. Sorry about my swearing expression.
It's okay.
And they don't have no interest in domestic politics of Kim regime. Their father might be the top cadre member in Pyongyang, but as long as they have a food to eat and then listen to South Korean popular music, they don't listen to their parents. And they are totally capitalist. They're no longer interested in going to some kind of government shop that doesn't pay any real currency for the salary. They want to be the realistic, the money maker, such as Dad, even though I graduated from Kim Il-sung University economy department, it doesn't mean anything at all. If I work for some economic bureau, my salary will be basically $10. But if I work as a truck driver, I can make $100 per week. So they are very capitalist. Although they are indoctrinated. So they basically say all the Western capitalists are evil to eat up North Korea, but their capitalists are okay. And also the one of the interesting things is that their romance life is much more open, visible, unlike older generation, whispering behind the shrubbery and maybe light hand in hand working in the dark night. No. They are very open. And if they choose a wife and don't like it, they dump and they divorce. So they are very contemporary, modern. And also they are very much interested in foreign education. I have a lot of defectors, actually, whom I met. And I asked, why did you leave your country? They seem to be coming from a fairly good category, core class. And they said, I tasted my study in China and I don't want to go back to Korea, North Korea. And he ended up to be in the United States and got a degree. And he's now American civil servant. I am very proud of it. So basically, they are interested in adapting new change and somehow the information seeping through to them. So I think this is maybe the potential hope generation for me.
I mean, I think you see this in a lot of societies where there's a large portion of the population is young, that they are what can drive change. But speaking of capitalism in North Korea, in the book, you describe corruption, though, as the coin of the realm. How has corruption pervaded North Korean society, and has it become an essential necessity for daily life?
Well, actually, it's not very surprising why North Korea is corrupt. Basically, they have all the correct ingredients. Weak government. Of course, government is so strong and they kill people randomly left and right. But in terms of governance, they are weak government. There is no institution and agencies for check and balance. And there is an absolute good model of corruption. Who is it? The top leader, Kim, doesn't work, and he collects all the money, all the funds, everything goes into pocket, and he's a slush fund, right? And also basically they learned that easy bribery will make their life easy. To get one single pass to go to some visit their hometown, instead of going through the 20, 30 stamps and then long process, if you hand over a little dollar of money, then you can get the process going on. So in a sense, all the ingredients were there. So in that case, why suddenly so rampant and so visible? The reason is Kim Il-sung era. They begin to wipe out the so-called reactionary generation, right? And it was a brutal purge continued at the beginning of the republic. So they had to be very careful not to be caught by the radar of the government radar. And so most people did a mini petty corruption, but not much. During the second generation Kim Jong-il era, it began to be a little bit more visible, more loudly, because money talks. They found out with the money they can do anything. And they really try to earn money. But again, the biggest factor was the mid-90s famine, that government does not feed us. We have to feed ourselves. In that case, you have to trade, you have to communicate, you have to transport goods. All this process requires so-called bribery as a tax. So these days, everybody does it. Government guys collect it, military collects it, and then basically that's a new form of life. And so implication is very important to me. The Soviet Union was not ruined because of the weapons development. Soviet Union was gone when the corruption and social erosion reached the climax. Citizens couldn't take anymore. So there is a huge gaps now happening because of corruption, money holders and non-money holders. And this is a very interesting situation that we observe.
To dig into these broader economic changes a little bit more, Marcus Nolan and Steph Haggard, who've done a lot of work interviewing defectors and others, have described economic change in North Korea as from the bottom up rather than top down, which we see in a lot of countries. However, contrary to what we might expect, it's been primarily driven by women in North Korea rather than men. Why has that been the case?
Well, as I said, during the mid-90s and late 90s famine period, there are tens of thousands of people arrived in South Korea. And I interviewed a lot of them. And one of the most interesting discoveries that I observed is that people who worked in the lower cadre, the bureaucracy, like the officials of the city, county, the institution, and scientists and teachers and laboratory workers who really believed in the system of a socialist system. And they were the first one to be dead because they ignored doing anything else. And so when the iron rice bowl was not filled with the government giving rice, they were the first one. And they told me, those well-educated guys stupidly believed in the system. They were gone first. And we all became traders. North Korea is not a producing country. It's a trading country. Trade A goods of the A region, sell in the B regions, something like that. And they absolutely becoming the changing. They don't believe the top-down changes at all. So it's a bottom-up in a sense. So when the market was first formed, it was illegal. The police and just beat up the woman and everything and confiscate and everything. But, when you have 2 kids and grandma is waiting for your income, the most traders are women, not men. They become very fiercely protecting their business. First, they give a bribery, and then they begin to fight. And there were actually sporadic rallies among these market side women. In Korea, we have expression, woman is strong in North Korea, man is strong in South Korea. Well, I'm from North because of my parents. But nonetheless, women are focused and more organized, and they are much more able. And also the one other important factor, if you are a man of the household, if you're missing your job, going to the marketplace, you will go to jail. Woman with a pack of cigarette, it's okay. So woman was easy to get out of the system and do the business. And that's the reason why bottom up and woman-led information and the economic change happening in North Korea.
So we have a country, it's going through change economically. It has this long-term leadership. It's a fairly rigid class society. How stable at the end of the day is the domestic situation in North Korea?
Overall, if you look at right now, you must say North Korea is stable. North Korea since 1948, all through ups and downs of famines and everything, and the death of the leader and second leader and the third leader with an interesting hairstyle appeared and ruling, with a kind of as a novice of the politics. But nonetheless, the regime continues, and seemingly everybody is kind of united in terms of rallies and supporting the Kim. So it's a very stable society, and they try to maintain that way. But we have expression, right? If you go to the lake, the ducks are very peacefully floating. But if you're a diver, if you see that there are ducks under the water, they are fiercely paddling. And that's, I think, North Korean society. Everybody seemingly satisfied and obeying and loyal to the regime, but they are all doing different things. And then there is also institutional and the agency conflict. And the military doesn't trust the cabinet members. Cabinets are kind of afraid of military. There are institutional turf battle. And of course, most important institution is the military. But even within the military, there is old guard and new guard. Old guard is basically old generals, but new guard is now new guards with all these great skills to protect the Kim Jong-un. And those special units kind of thing is hated by the old guards, and Kim Jong-un already purged a lot of old guards. So there are a lot of competitions and conflicts existing, but on the surface it's stable. But if you remember one thing, it's a country ruled by one family mostly by men, three Kim, right? In North Korean culture and historic legacy, woman cannot be a leader. And as we've seen in the case of 2011 succession politics from Kim Jong-il to Kim Jong-un, the country was not ready, and really lots of turmoil happened. And Kim Jong-un is trying very hard to perpetuate his regime. But he have only very little children, and he is rumored to have a lot of health problem. Or in simply, the longevity, everything you cannot predict. If the leader certainly evaporates or incapacitated to rule as a sanguine leader, I think that's maybe beginning of a chaotic period that North Korea will show the unlabeling social political conflict. So in a sense, kind of an ironical situation.
I'd like to turn a little bit now to sort of the exterior side of things. Obviously, we have a new president here in the United States in Joe Biden. We just went through a period where President Trump engaged in direct diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. Biden said he's unwilling to do this without progress on the issue of denuclearization. What is North Korea's strategic calculus towards the Biden administration likely to be?
Well, as we saw, that the democracy problem is that every 4 years, president come and go. In North Korea, three Kims, three generations of same Kim family reside without any changes. So in that sense, North Korea is in a better position with the institutional legacy and memories and all these things. They know how to handle America. But basically, North Korea is saying that, look, we are interested in dealing with you if you have a bold switchover policy. Bold switchover policy is what? Well, let us have a nuke and let's be your friends. And then when we become friends, while we are having nukes and normalized with you, then we can trust you and we may get rid of nukes. But till then, you are our threat. And that's our dilemma. We cannot change. So their basic calculus to Biden is that they'll parry around and they will kind of like showing that they do something, but fundamentally, they're not interested in giving up nukes. And American policy is the same. Give up nukes. So in a sense, it's a conflicting situation right now. So I don't expect anything dramatic things happening. And basically, time will fly and maybe we will have another election, very unfortunately. And that's my seeing the situation, ironically.
No, we have elections all the time. One of the other changes, though, and this dates back, some might argue the end of the Obama administration, but at least since the Trump administration, is that we've entered into a new period of geostrategic competition with China. How does North Korea fit into the US-China geopolitical rivalry?
Well, first of all, North Korea to US is a threat. Why? It's not a direct threat to the United States, but it's a conventional military threat to Japan and South Korea. And also it has a potential nuclear and missile threats to the continental US. So it's a threat. For China, North Korea is an interesting case. It's the first of all nuisance. Second of all, it's kind of like a very bad communist younger brother who always asks for some help but don't do anything themselves. And also, it's kind of like bringing down the China's image into a third-rate country because kind of China is supporting this bad pariah state, and they don't do anything at all. And also, it's constant problem maker. Why? Because in the border, there are a lot of minority Koreans and defectors coming, and it's upsetting Chinese inner peace. So for China, North Korea has been really a burden, although lip service is that is our great ally and we support it. North Korea's role for China have one benefit for China. It makes China to be a great mediator in between US and North Korea, as if that China can do something great to change the situation. In my view, China will not do anything at all. And basically, North Korea remains to be nuisance for China and threats for the United States.
So before I turn to audience questions and to everyone watching, please, I've seen there's a few questions now in the YouTube chat function, but please leave your questions there if you have a question for Katie. I want to turn to the issue of unification. And first, we'll just start with, the most basic question. Do you think unification is possible? What are your views on this?
During the summer of 1992, till the 1991 summer, whole 1 year, I was working then at the RAND Corporation, and I asked the U.S. government to send me to Germany because I want to observe the German unification process. Somehow my proposal was very attractive. So even though I was an Asian scholar, they sent me to Germany 1 year, and I observed it. And on the German Unification Day was October 3rd, which is the same day of a Korean Foundation Day. And I went to Koblenz to observe the German unification. I was the only one who was weeping. And all my German colleagues asked me, "Why are you crying, Katie?" I said, "I'm from JIT Korea, from South Korea." And they all cheered for me. "Katie, we toast for you. Korea is next to be unified." I was very hopeful. There was 1991. I was wrong. For the last several decades, two Korean politics got nasty, dirtier, and riddled with the nuclear issues. And a lot of people say, gave up dream, Katie, you're getting old. So it will not happen until you die. And I said, no, I'm not giving up. Actually, I'm very hopeful. Seeing the social changes, youth changes, and information changes. And I think it's our moral obligation to help North Korea change themselves and prepare for the unification. We have a song, our dream is unification. I really would like to see the unification before I get too old. That's the reason why I do exercise every day to live a long life.
So, you mentioned your time in Germany and German unification, and even beyond that, we live in a world to where there are two Germanic states, Germany and Austria. Neither is viewed as an existential threat to the other. Why is South Korea such an existential threat to North Korea?
One of the biggest reasons is that Austria and Germany, of course, they hated each other, and then Germany occupied Austria. But basically, they are Judeo-Christian community, Western Bloc. They have an institution that is shared by the same country. I mean, two countries, democracy, open economy, elected officials. In a sense that they have some rivalry going on, but it's not like your nemesis or enemy. But North chose the wrong road, and then South Korea remained to be the democratic country. And I think for poor North Korea, this burgeoning, developing, rich South Korean economy and politics, open society, and the freedom of everything, I think the South Korea itself is existential threat more than anything else. And that's the reason why doggedly saying that don't touch us, we're having a nuke. But if you are interested in, we can just join together and get rid of Americans and let's unify. That's a North Korean approach.
So, Katie, I have a good deal of questions here. I want to try and get through what we can. So the first one is from Albert from Radio Free Asia. He'd like to know, recently, North Korea has continued to launch various missiles. What do you think is the reason for this?
Well, there is a very famous poem written by Marie-Laurent Sang, a French poet, and then basically saying that the saddest woman is not a sick woman or abandoned woman or heartbroken woman. It's a forgotten woman. It's the saddest woman. When I read that poem when I was a little girl, it's kind of stuck in my brain. I was learning French then. And I say North Korea can be forgotten. And that is very dangerous. They need the existential threat. And then some kind of attack scenario and all these things. We are under the radar, of attack. So if they keep up silence and don't do anything, sooner or later, maybe Americans will forget them. Everybody will forget them. They have to do something. As a matter of fact, I was wondering why Kim Jong-un is so quiet. So I think it's time to do something. So it's their usual routine. The only thing is that we don't know when and where, but they do.
So Kelly Primrose would like to know, what do you think about the push to create an end of war declaration between the North and the South? Will it create any meaningful changes for North Korea?
Well, in a sense that the Korea is stuck with the Korean War mentality and then these divided families and brothers, and my heart is always broken. And I always think that two Koreas should initiate themselves without the relying and depending on other powers. But the politics have been so different; it has been very difficult. So, if North Korea and then or South Korea, both leaders agree peace declaration or getting rid of all this the armistice agreement, that is principally very fine. But the real issue is that since we are in peace, we get rid of armistice. We are no longer technically in war. Why the foreign army is in the U.S.? In Korea, the U.S. Army. So U.S. forces in Korea should all leave. And that's fine too. If South Korea is responsible and reasonable and saying rationally, we can handle ourselves. But there are so many problems about military complexities and political issues. So in a sense, it's not straight line. Jig, and suddenly blasting. So it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. My heart is broken, but I don't buy that.
So Roberta Cohen asks, how do you see change coming to North Korea? Through market forces, increased information, and how can the outside world help to reinforce this?
That's the very good question, Roberta. And she's, of course, a global human rights leader, and I always respect her. I quit my job in March. We don't have any mandatory retirement. It's a very good place, but I left to focus on exactly what Roberta says. When I was growing up, my father told me the most important thing is the human relationship, Katie, not the wealth, not the title, not the promotion, not education, with everybody. I invested my last 50 years of a professional life into the human relationship. All the defectors trust me. All the human rights activists, I can engage with them. I know a lot of policymakers, elites, analysts. So we all work to make North Korea more exposed to the outside information and help them to make their own decision. I think it's a long process, but I think it's doable. And that's why I quit the job, and I'm working on that right now.
Sounds like a really good cause. And I would like to move to Steve Goddard's question. It will soon be the first decade of Kim Jong-un's rule. How have things changed in that time, and how can you predict, or what can you predict for the next decade?
When Kim Il Sung established the republic, and he worked hard, and as a matter of fact, in the 1950s and 60s, North Korean economy was better than South Korea, and but overall the socialist economy is never be successful. So for that matter, I buy the Frank Fukuyama's end of history theory in a sense. So open competition, stimulation, incentives, very important for the human activities. North Korea's economy has been deteriorating all the time. Kim Jong-un inherited the good slush fund. He was a multi-billionaire, fortune, the registered, not registered, but billionaire. And he was a good spender. And the situation is changing. Not many free things coming from South Korea, China, globally. And COVID happens, economic sanction happens. So I think he, as a young man who came to power, who did not have any training and experience in politics, I must give him A, much better than most leaders of stupid countries. But he is facing dilemma. He is currently in the bottleneck right now. So I think next 4 or 5 years will be very dicey because of economic situation and social control is very getting difficult, and cellular phones information spreading. Social control may also lose its edge. So in a sense, it's a very interesting period we are looking forward. And I think every movement we have to pay attention to.
So I have a question from Park Chan Mo from PUST, Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. Excuse me. PUST, not from PUST, my apologies, I misread that. PUST has been very effective to change North Korean students, globalized since in 2009 until the US State Department banned US citizens. What do you think about the travel ban?
I have a very mixed feeling about that, and actually, I met not the Wambier, but Wambier's family's lawyer, who approached me how to deal with the North Korea and asking me very pointed questions such as, is a young man tortured and all these kind of things. And I did my very best to help him to understand North Korea. And I think a travel ban is a kind of like last resolution that American put. And there are a lot of NGO charity experts and the people who would like to go, and then it's very tough for them. So my heart is torn. And so in a sense that I said the North Korean people should be exposed to the outside information, right? And we have to bring out the North Korean information to us too, so two-way. But with the travel ban, economic sanctions and everything, tightening news and tightening doors will be actually getting more difficult and difficult. So we are kind of in a dilemma, the moral dilemma and political dilemma. How do we do it? But I think maybe some of the like North Korean top leaders should have a little bit of signal that we should really try to better job in terms of handling tourism and all these things, and travel ban, please. But the problem is that Kim does not give a damn about his people. While they're suffering or hungry or dying, he doesn't care because he is a rich guy. So that is the real problem, the North Korea. How do we change that? So my answer is a little bit unclear maybe, but I think we are trapped in between.
To wrap things up, I have two questions from John Fay. One relates back to Roberta's question. He asked specifically what could or should be done to see change in North Korea. And then also he asked, what do you recommend to promote social transformation, which is fundamental to North Korea? So the two questions are sort of tied together.
Well, since March, I've been strategizing. I've been pulling out my files. I've been making the list of the people that I work with and contact to. and pros and cons about doing A. What are the pros and cons doing B? So in a sense, it's the plan and strategy in work in progress. And I don't want to reveal too much in detail, because whenever we deal with North Korea, everything is kiss of death. We have to protect the people who are involved with that. And then we have to move very prudently. So in a sense, to John, my answer is that it's not that simple and easy, but think about the abundance of good brains and good hearts and good experienced people who left the country of North Korea, who are willing to work with us. And then human rights experts like Roberta and maybe even John, they all have great ideas, but somehow the community is divided. He does anything, I do this thing, we don't, even the defectors are divided. That is the problem. So in a sense that somehow, how do we find the foci, the real focus? People can get together, center of gravity is pulled, and everybody pitching in. It's not the zero-sum game, but win-win game. So maybe I'm personally will be willing to meet John and share some of my ideas, but publicly I must say, process is intertangled and difficult and complicated, but nonetheless, I am doing my own portion and see how it goes. And maybe by about December, I may have some interim report of what I've been doing. That's all I can say.
It's interesting that you mentioned, though, that sort of everyone does their own thing, and people don't really coordinate because I read David Brooks's columns in the New York Times a lot. And, I remember he was talking about how there was a pilot project done in Canada to where, because in most cities, if you're trying to create social change, nobody works together. You have people who deal with hunger, you have people who deal with homelessness, people who deal with different aspects of the social challenges cities face, but none of them coordinate. And so they actually got together and started meeting in a few cities as a pilot and working together. And what they found was that actually they were much more effective once they started working together and sort of coordinating their efforts rather than trying to just deal with the subset of what they were doing on their own. So I think, there's a lot of merit to try and bring people together to coordinate some of their efforts.
Yeah, so I think that I worked for the think tank and research community for the last 4 decades. What I learned, one thing is that seemingly looks like a fox and skunks and elephants and everybody, all different animals trying to live their own life, but somehow maybe big lion up here saying that, look, we are endangered species, let's get together and do the brainstorming. How to fight against the stupid killers with guns and, Chinese who poaches us for the ivories. So if the proceedings will be very small, but maybe I will try to give us some speeches and write some opinions and so on. Whatever the fund that I can collect, I think great brainstorming is necessary, maybe in a very quiet corner. Everybody come. There is no discrimination. If even a non-defector is saying, I'm interested in, please come. Provide hotel rooms, brainstorming for about a week. What the hell is going on? Why we've been losing? This is my first plan. As a matter of fact, I'm working on that plan right now. That's one confessed plan to you.
Katie, it sounds like a great plan. It's been a pleasure talking with you about this. We've covered a wide range of issues on North Korea. The book really is great. I hope people will get a copy, will read it. And I really appreciate you joining us today to talk about this. For everyone watching as well, so this Thursday, we'll also be having a conversation at 9 a.m. with Chung Jae-ho on South Korea-China relations. And then on October 5th, we'll be announcing soon, we are going to release our new survey on U.S. attitudes towards the Korean Peninsula. There's some interesting data. The survey was in the field just after Kabul fell. So I hope people can gain a lot from that as well. But Katie, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much, Troy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.